Hola, amigas. I'm Norma, your host here in the Latinas en Libros book club. Welcome to this month's Latinas en Libros book chat series. We're so excited to kick off our summer reads with an incredible author whose contributions to the literary landscape have made huge waves here in the United States, in Latin America, and all over the world. Welcome to this very special edition of Latinas en Libros. This month, we have the pleasure of welcoming Isabel Allende as we celebrate the release of her newest novel, El Viento Conoce Mi Nombre, The Wind Knows My Name. This book follows Samuel Adler, when at 5 years old, his father disappears during Kristallnacht, the night he and his family lose everything. As her child's safety becomes even harder to guarantee, Samuel's mother secures a spot for him on a Kindertransport train out of Nazi-occupied Austria to England. 8 decades later, Anita Diaz and her mother board another train, fleeing looming danger in El Salvador, seeking refuge in the United States. But their arrival coincides with the new family separation policy, and 7-year-old Anita finds herself alone at a camp in Nogales. This book tells the tale of two unforgettable characters, both in search of family and home. Isabel, mil gracias por estar aquí hoy con nosotras. Estoy tan emocionada de poder platicar contigo sobre tu nuevo libro, El Viento Conoce Mi Nombre. I'm so incredibly excited to chat with you about your new book, The Wind Knows My Name. Amigas, for today's chat, we'll be weaving Spanish and English into the conversation so you can follow along in your preferred language. Al final de nuestra charla, nuestras amigas van a poder hacer sus preguntas en inglés o en español. This is such a beautiful, powerful story. I can't wait to dive in. Isabel, ¿nos puedes contar un poquito, brevemente, de la historia que transcurre en tu nuevo libro?
La historia empieza en 1938, en noviembre, cuando hay una represión brutal contra los judíos en la Europa ocupada por los alemanes. Y las familias judías desesperadas aceptaron visas que dio Inglaterra para 10.000 niños solos, sin su familia, como una solución temporal para salvarlos de la represión nazi. Y esta señora se encuentra en la terrible opción que cualquier madre hoy día piensa en eso y dice, ¿sería yo capaz de hacer eso, de poner a mi niño en un tren y mandarlo a destino desconocido? Pero resulta que eso es lo que hacen.
Qué decisión tan difícil, ¿no?
Es tremendo. Y piensa tú que muchas familias lo hacen en Centroamérica, que mandan a sus niños a través de varios países para encontrar asilo y seguridad en los Estados Unidos. Entonces, el arco entre ese momento histórico y lo que pasa hoy en la frontera era tan claro para mí que la novela empieza con ese niño en 1938 y termina 86 años más tarde con el mismo niño en los Estados Unidos.
Me fascinó.
Y aparece otro personaje que viene, como quien dice, no solo a recordarle todo lo que pasó a este hombre, sino abrirle el corazón a algo que él nunca había experimentado antes.
Me fascinó cómo incluiste a estos dos personajes tan importantes y tan tiernamente. Me encantó. ¿Nos puedes contar un poquito más sobre el título de la novela? ¿Tiene un significado especial?
El título, El viento conoce mi nombre, viene porque a los niños que los separan en la frontera o a los que vienen, los niños que no vienen acompañados, tienen un número, o sea, su archivo, su documentación tiene un número. Entonces, muchas veces se pierde el nombre del niño porque son tan chiquitos que ni siquiera saben su nombre, o el nombre no lo pueden pronunciar en inglés. Entonces, se les pone un número. Y la idea es que Anita, la niñita que pierde a su madre y pierde su nombre y pierde todo, ella dice que por lo menos el viento va a conocer su nombre. Ella no es un número.
Me duele el alma pensar que esta situación continúa a ocurrir cada día. O sea, me duele. Y esta historia, esta novela, es tan especial y está, inmediatamente la tienen que ir a agarrar, amigas. Si no han comprado el libro, este es una historia que no se la van a querer perder. Isabel, ¿nos puedes contar un poquito sobre Kindertransport y de dónde encontraste la inspiración para esta novela?
Bueno, la inspiración la encontré en un caso real. Mi fundación trabaja con otras organizaciones sin fines de lucro y con programas en la frontera que están tratando de ayudar, sobre todo a las mujeres y a los niños. Y a través de mi fundación me enteré del caso de una niña como Anita, un caso muy similar, en la misma situación, que tuvo un mal fin desgraciadamente, pero fue un caso que me pegó muy de cerca porque la niña era ciega. Y entonces de solo pensar en una niña pequeña que la separan de la madre, que ha dejado atrás todo lo que conoce, que no habla inglés y que es ciega, no sabe dónde está. El terror y la soledad, la angustia de esa niña es una cosa tremenda. Entonces esa historia me pegó mucho. Esto sucedió durante la pandemia. Y
Oh, entonces, un
durante
poco
la
recién.
Recién, es muy reciente.
Sí.
Entonces, yo tenía todos los contactos con la gente a través de mi fundación. Fue muy fácil hacer la investigación. Y lo que me preguntabas del Kindertransport, es una historia muy conocida. Cuando vino lo que se llamó la Noche de los Cristales Rotos, que fue en noviembre de 1938, en todos los países ocupados por los alemanes o con influencia alemana, rompieron masas de gente, rompió las ventanas de todas las tiendas judías y después se metieron en las casas y quemaron casas y le pegaron a la gente, hubo varios muertos. Y esa fue una represión totalmente dirigida, enfocada a la población judía. Entonces, rápidamente los dirigentes de la comunidad judía se dieron cuenta de que había que tratar de salir, de escapar a donde se pudiera, pero era muy difícil conseguir visas, porque no les daban visa para ningún lado. Entonces, Inglaterra ofreció esas visas para los niños y se llamó el Kindertransport, transporte de los niños.
Gracias por contarnos un poquito más de dónde agarraste la inspiración para tu nueva novela, Isabel. Una pregunta más en español. Este libro entrelaza historias de desalojo, del pasado y presente. Y aunque estas historias de inmigración no son propiamente tu historia de inmigración, tú también has tenido la experiencia de no poder regresar a casa. ¿Nos puedes contar cómo tu experiencia de exilio, de no poder ver a tu familia, te ayudó a escribir las historias de Samuel y Anita?
Ya llevo varios libros escribiendo sobre gente desplazada.
Sí.
Algunos son inmigrantes, otros son refugiados. Y otra gente simplemente que se encuentra fuera de sus lugares de origen. Porque si yo tuviera que definirme, diría que soy una eterna desplazada. Nací en el Perú, mi padre abandonó a mi madre y mi mamá se volvió a Chile, a la casa de sus padres, me crié en Chile, después se casó con un diplomático, pasé la infancia y la juventud viajando, siguiendo los pasos de mi padrastro, a quien quise mucho por lo demás. La palabra padrastro suena tan duro, pero yo lo adoraba.
Sí.
Y, y después me tocó ser refugiada política después del golpe militar de Chile y después inmigrante en los Estados Unidos. No porque viniera siguiendo el sueño americano, sino que porque me enamoré de un gringo.
¡Ay! El amor. Por el amor se vale todo, ¿no?
Me enamoré de un gringo y dejé todo tirado y me vine a pasar una semana con él con la idea de que me lo iba a sacar de la cabeza. Bueno, estuve 28 años con él, así que no me lo saqué de la cabeza tan rápido.
Bueno, pero 28 años por lo menos te divertiste, ojalá, ¿sí?
Y sí. Y entonces conozco muy bien esa sensación de dejar todo lo que le es familiar a uno y empezar de cero. Pero yo he sido una refugiada y una inmigrante privilegiada. Primero porque como refugiada fui a dar a la Venezuela de los años 70, un país abierto, rico, generoso, que recibía inmigrantes de todas partes del mundo. Había trabajo para todo el mundo. Y era un país hospitalario y alegre, muy alegre.
No.
Ya. Eh, a mí me tocó esa Venezuela. Y cuando ya después me vine a los Estados Unidos, yo ya era escritora, o sea que me podía mantener con mis libros y no tenía que estar limpiando baños. Y, y además, como me vine y me casé con este americano, con este gringo, tenía papeles, porque yo quería traer a mis hijos, entonces necesitaba hacerme ciudadana. Nunca fui ilegal y nunca tuve los problemas que tiene la gente que emigra.
Y quizás por eso puedes escribir tan bellamente sobre la experiencia y porque has tenido tanta experiencia y has logrado tanto y esta novela es solamente un ejemplo más de lo que has hecho. Vamos a empezar la conversación en inglés para que las amigas que no entiendan muy bien el español puedan seguir con nosotros, ¿eh?
Claro que sí.
One of the reoccurring themes in this book is the ability to cope with unimaginable tragedy. When we are first introduced to Leticia, we learn that she and her father narrowly escaped the massacre that occurred in El Mozote, El Salvador. You write, she rarely spoke of that time. She had never even talked to her father about it because he held his pain in the sealed box of memory, believing that only silence would keep the hurt intact. Words dilute and deform memories. He didn't want to forget anything. Can you tell us a little bit more about the role of silence in your characters' lives?
Well, I have, in many of my books, I have people, especially women, who fall into long periods of silence. And I think that comes from my grandmother. My grandmother was an extraordinary woman, very funny and wonderful. She was clairvoyant. She talked to the spirits. She had seances. And sometimes she would fall in these spells of silence in which she would retreat inside. And I find in myself that tendency. When I was a teenager, I spent a long time not talking. I would talk in school, but not talking at all at home. Just,
Wow.
I was so angry and so confused. And so it was a terrible time for me. And my form of defense was to go into silence. And now when I am angry, really angry, I don't talk. So now I have a new husband. And when we got together, we were both already quite old. I said, look, Roger, if I keep quiet and I am silent, talk to me. Force me to talk, because I can. It's like a vortex.
Yeah.
That starts and then I get deeper and deeper and deeper into it, and then it's impossible to come out.
Yes, I love, first of all, I love that you were able to share that experience with Roger, that you know yourself so well that you were
I know that it's going to be awful.
SOS, just a FYI, if this happens, me ayudas, me echas la mano.
Me echas la mano, porque si no, ¿cómo hacemos?
Sí, porque si no, y así, solamente así, ¿verdad? En relación. But I love that you've learned so much about how you interact with silence, and that you're sharing some of that through your characters, and that you're.
But I also have to say that silence is essential for my work. Yeah, I spend 10 hours a day in silence because my work demands it. I'm writing or researching. So I can be in a very uncomfortable place. I can be in an almost dark place, but I have to have silence, because otherwise my brain doesn't work.
And I could see it going both ways, though, because as a writer and as someone who spends so much time alone, I could see you having a very different relationship with silence. I could envision that you would be like, someone talk to me, alguien hábleme, alguien dígame algo, porque si no, no va a estar buena la noche.
There's the negative silence of anger, and there's the positive silence of needing this space and this silence to work.
I love that. Isabel, let's talk a little bit about the grief of loss. Now, loss is something that Samuel and Anita both experienced firsthand. Can you share with us how your own life experience informed your ability to capture the character's sense of loss?
You know, I'm a good listener, and I observe carefully. And this is a characteristic of mine since I was a child. When I wrote The House of the Spirits 40 years ago, I have a character that voiced in silence for 9 years. And the grief of the different people in the novel and the circumstances that provoked that grief were clear to me, and I could relate to them because I watched carefully. But then after my daughter died, I was 50 when my daughter died, everything changed. And I experienced the deepest grief that I have ever experienced. And in a way, it taught me a lot about other people's grief as well. Because I wrote a book called Paula. The book was published, and this was 31 years ago. It doesn't go by a week without me receiving at least 2 or 3 messages from especially women relating to that book, because everybody has losses. Everybody has grief. It doesn't have to be the death of a child. It can be many other things. It can be cancer. It can be the death of a parent. It can be the loss of a person you love because that person left you or whatever. Divorce, so many things. And sometimes grief is subtle. You don't even identify it. I got a letter the other day of a person who said, I haven't spoken to my mother for 18 years. And after reading your book, I contacted her, and I know now that I carried a deep grief for all that time. The grief of the loss of the mother, the grief of the anger between them. There are so many forms of grieving, and people grieve in different forms. No one can tell you how long you will mourn. It's very personal.
Yes, Isabel, I found your ability to capture the way, the many different ways in which these characters experience grief on some form, in some form, on some level. I found it mesmerizing because grief is something that I think a lot of people struggle to talk about. And the way in which you can capture it, the way in which you describe all of the small moments and large moments that these characters are trying to process really felt so enlightened and felt so, it's almost liberating to be able to see someone else transverse grief.
I think that's the power of literature, that it brings you together. I mean, we've all heard about the millions of people who are displaced in the world and the millions of people on the other side of the border who are suffering a humanitarian crisis. But those are numbers. They don't really mean anything until you see the one person and hear one story, one name, one face, and then that person could be you. That person could be your child. And what literature does is it brings that person so close that you can relate to that particular grief or that particular story. It's not an abstract thing. That's right. It's the connection. And I think that that's what my work is all about. My work is about relationships and about emotions. So if I can bring my reader close to my story, I have achieved something.
Oh, and yes, you have. And let me tell you, Isabel, that these books are beautiful. Just
thank you.
Really achieved it. I love the way in which you weave these two stories together. It's so timely, it's so important, and it's so heartfelt. So, amigas, I don't want you to think that this book is only filled with sorrow. No,
it's not.
No, it's not. So let's switch gears a little bit and discuss love. Isabel, you included several love stories in this book. You give the readers stories, love between parent-child, husband-wife, extended family, fiancés, lovers. We had it all. We had affairs, we had broken hearts. Why is love such an important part of this book?
Because I think love moves the world. We do crazy things for love and wonderful things for love. I mean, we are heroes sometimes because out of love, and we become villains out of love as well. So it's, I think, the most important emotion that one can feel. You know, I wrote a book many years ago called what was the name? Of Love and Shadows. And at one point, one of the characters says that fear is stronger than love. And And I have thought a lot about that, and I'm sorry I wrote that. I was young at the time when I wrote it. I didn't know that love is much stronger than fear. And I've learned that in the years that I have lived since I wrote that book. But if I had to write it today, I would say that love is stronger than fear.
Cuéntanos todo. Will you share with us the role that love has played in your life? I want to hear everything.
Let's talk about romantic love, because the strongest love affair of my life was my mother. We were so close. We wrote to each other every single day for decades. And I kept the letters. I have 24,000 letters in boxes in chronological order in the garage. So in a box per year, decades of letters. And so that when my mother died, I felt that the person who had known me the best, who had loved me the most, for the longest possible time, because she loved me before I was born, it was my mom. But then I have had also the love of the certain men that have accompanied me. Unfortunately, I am heterosexual. And so it's always been men, and men are difficult. It would have been much easier if I wasn't heterosexual and I could have had women companions. That would have been great. We would have much,
it's not too late.
No, much more in common, I'm sure. Well, in any case, I've been married 3 times. I'm 80 years old, and if I live long enough, I will probably marry another time. So you never know how long.
Don't tell Roger. No, amigas, no le cuenten a Roger, nada.
No. I've told him I hope that he lasts a long time, but it depends how he lasts. Because if he's completely demented, who wants him?
I hear that. I hear that. Let's be real.
Well, and so I have done a lot, taken risks and done crazy things out of love. So I understand the sentiment very well. And I understand also when love ends and when you have to let go. And when it's useless to try to keep afloat something that has been sinking for years. When I was 74 and I divorced Willie, the guy, the gringo I told you about, we divorced, and by that time he was 79 and I was 74. And people said, why are you divorcing after 28 years that you have invested in this relationship? At your age, you will be alone. Yeah, but it takes more courage to stay in a bad relationship than to leave.
Oh,
easier to leave, because if you stay, you're stuck. And even if you are 74, let's say that I live 6 more months, I want those 6 months to be free.
Isabel, what an inspiration to all of us, for all of the amigas that are on this call today. Please, let's all heed. Let's all heed Isabel's. Well, no, but Isabel, the way that you're living life is such a beautiful way. It's such an inspiration.
Look, I'm not advocating for divorce. What I'm saying is, if it doesn't work, get out. The other day, I received a letter from a young woman who told me that she had this fascinating, seductive, wonderful boyfriend, but he beats her up. And I said, get out immediately, because it's never going to get better. It escalates, and it might end in femicide, who knows? Get out. A week later, I get a letter from the boyfriend who said, no. Yeah, who said, what the heck? You told her to leave me and whatever. You haven't heard my part of the story. Let me give you my version. So you see, but I would still tell her, get out, right? Because there are situations that are really not okay. You cannot stay, and if you can get out, get out.
I hear that, Isabel. It lands for me, and I'm sure it lands for many of us on this call today. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being open about this topic, because this is a topic.
But also, I have to say, Norma, that Willie never hit me or anything like that. Just the relationship started to deteriorate. Yeah. And then we went to therapy, we tried to fix it, it didn't work out.
Yeah, and Isabel, I think that's normal. And I think it's beautiful that you're opening up about this, because I think that so many of us culturally, socially, we're taught to stay in it. And sometimes we don't really have the role models to help us say, you know what, it's okay. Because if you have 6 months to live, why don't you enjoy it? Why don't you find true happiness? And if this isn't bringing you that happiness, then it's okay to do
No,
something.
that's why I keep telling to young women, work, make a living. That will give you the freedom. Because if you have kids, if you depend, if you cannot pay the bills, then you are stuck also.
Yeah.
In order to have, feminism begins with the capacity, first of all, to be aware of what's going on, and then to be able to support yourself, even if it's badly. Really.
It's beautiful. It's such a wonderful reminder. It's such a wonderful reminder, because I think there are many cases where, you fall in love, you think it's going to be happily ever after, you want to be taken care of, and then you wake up and you realize, pues a lo mejor no. ¿Y ahora qué hacemos? And if you can't take care of yourself, I think that's sage advice. Isabel, again, thank you for sharing this wisdom. O sea, for real, thank you. Okay, let's talk about one of the commonalities among your characters is their ability to adapt to new locations and circumstances, whether it's Samuel arriving in England or Nadine's adoption of a new location or Anita's Azabar. Can you tell us more about why it's important for you that your characters share this trait?
Because people who are displaced have a very hard time adapting. And it's very different to adapt when you're a refugee than when you're a migrant. If you are an immigrant in a country, you are usually young. You have chosen to go there to have a better life, and you will work hard for the future. A refugee is someone who is forced to get out, who goes to a place that he or she has not chosen, who will be received with hostility and is always looking back, always waiting for the moment to return to their place of origin. And because I have experienced both, I can tell you that if you do not adapt, if you don't let go of the past, life is really, really hard. And usually the first generation doesn't adapt well. It's the second generation that makes a living in another place and has a life. You know that the average time a refugee spends away from home is between 17 and 25 years. Many refugees leave with the key of their houses in their pockets to go back. And when they go back, there is no home to go back.
Qué tristeza. I can't imagine. I have not had that. That has not been my reality. I have had the privilege of being born and raised in the same country.
Yeah.
No me puedo imaginar. Ok, Isabel, vamos a empezar nuestra conversación aquí. Yo creo que este es un buen momento para comenzarla de vuelta en español. Una pregunta más en español, antes que empecemos con las preguntas. Podemos hablar sobre la importancia del desahogo. ¿Nos cuentas esto de Samuel? Les contó a la mujer y a la niña sobre su infancia traumática. La pérdida de su familia, el exilio en un lugar extraño y hostil, sobre ser huérfano, siempre solitario, siempre asustado. Terminó sollozando y también Anita y Leticia lloraron. Qué importante es el poder de desahogarse.
Yo creo que es importante abrirse. Mira, en la peor época de mi vida, cuando murió mi hija, la tendencia es cerrarse. La tendencia es, ya, no quiero saber nada de nadie, que nadie me hable, que me dejen sola. Es lo peor que puedes hacer. Cuando estás en un momento traumático, lo mejor que puedes hacer es tratar de conectarte con otros, abrirte, contar lo que te pasa. Porque ahí te das cuenta que todo el mundo te puede ayudar. Pide ayuda y se te dará. Y eso yo creo que las mujeres lo tenemos más claro que los hombres, porque las mujeres nos abrimos más fácilmente. Mira, Se juntan 5 mujeres que no se han visto en 10 años y en menos de 5 minutos se contaron las vidas.
Sí,
¿No es cierto? Y se cuentan
sí,
los
claro.
secretos más profundos.
Y todo.
Todo. Y eso es un tremendo alivio. Yo creo que es una forma maravillosa de comunicarnos. Y en esas culturas como la nuestra, que son tan abiertas y que todo lo contamos, lo pasamos mucho mejor que entre los puritanos que se guardan las espaldas y viven con secretos. Mi mamá me decía, cuando yo escribía una memoria, mi mamá me decía, pero mijita, usted lo cuenta todo, se pone en una posición tan vulnerable. Yo le decía, mamá, no es lo que cuento lo que me hace vulnerable, sino los secretos que guardo.
¿Y qué es la diferencia, Isabel?
Es mucha la diferencia, porque lo que yo cuento, todo lo que yo cuento ya está fuera. No me pueden hacer chantaje con lo que ya conté.
Claro.
Pero con los secretos que guardo los cargo como una piedra adentro. Y los únicos secretos que tengo son los que me han confiado otras personas, o sea, los secretos que no me pertenecen. Pero de lo mío lo cuento todo, porque mira, nunca he cometido nada tan terrible como para que no lo haya hecho otra persona. Claro, no he hecho, he hecho muchas estupideces, pero no he hecho maldades.
Pero ¿quién no las hace? O sea, eso es vivir. Hacer cosas estúpidas es parte de la vida.
Por lo mismo puedes contarlo. Cuéntalo y verás que todas las demás lo hicieron también.
Y si no lo dijeron, o si no lo hicieron, y si no te están contando, a lo mejor te están mintiendo. Así es que a lo mejor necesitas nuevas amigas, ¿no?
Claro.
Bueno, Isabel, una preguntita más. Ya esas últimas preguntas voy a hacer una y una, así que vamos a empezar en inglés. So The Wind Knows My Name. In many ways, this is a story about learning to live life despite the hardships that we encounter. One of my favorite passages is when you write, looking back on the past, he realized with regret that he had in fact wasted his time, that when he abandoned this world, he would leave behind barely a faint trail of dust, one that would vanish in the first light of dawn. He dreamed of being able to start again, imagining another life, one more like Nadine's, experiencing deep pleasure and deep pain, taking risks, facing challenges and defeats, a bold life. So as I navigate my own challenges, as we all navigate challenges, these words left me feeling so inspired to take risks. Yeah. Isabel, what do you recommend on how to live a bold life?
Don't live in fear. Don't live in fear. We are often afraid of what has never happened and what will never happen. Or maybe it will happen, and when it happens, you will be able to confront it, because we don't know how strong we are until we are tested. And life tests us in many ways, and most of us survive and flourish after we are tested. So I don't live in fear. I see my friends afraid of getting old, afraid of maybe lacking resources, that they will run out of money, that they will be alone, that they will be sick, that they were losing their minds, that afraid, all the time afraid of something. And that has not happened yet. So don't be afraid, just take the risk, plunge into life, and then you see how you survive. You see how you manage it. There's nothing to lose. And so I think that what Samuel feels when he says, I wasted my life, he lost when I say there's nothing to lose, because we hold on to our little safety, our the little things we know, our comfort zone, and then we don't live. You know what? I see in young people, my grandchildren, that they date online. And first, there's a profile in which you study everything about the person. And then you don't want to take a risk. So everything is very measured. We go first for a coffee, and what kind of love is that? No, just plunge into it. And if it works, okay. And if it doesn't work, you go to therapy. And if it doesn't work, you divorce. So what?
That's it. Es todo. Okay. Amigas, you have heard Isabel. Live without fear, plunge into it. Amigas, si no entendieron esta última pregunta, Isabel, ¿nos puedes contar un poquito de lo que nos has contado en inglés y en español para esas amigas que solamente entiendan español? O
Bueno,
que no entiendan inglés, sí.
you want me to say it ¿quieres que lo diga en español?
Sí, por favor.
Bueno, estábamos hablando de correr riesgos, de que hay una parte en el libro en que Samuel dice que dejó pasar la vida y que perdió la vida realmente porque no la alcanzó a vivir a plenitud. En otra parte del libro él dice que su gran pecado es el pecado de la indiferencia.
Sí.
Por protegerse, no quiere saber lo que pasa, no quiere saber lo que hace su mujer, no quiere saber lo que pasa en el mundo, no quiere saber nada. Él quiere que no le muevan el piso. Y entonces por vivir seguro no vive. Es como el pájaro que se queda en la jaula para no salir a volar, porque volando lo puede agarrar un halcón y se lo come, o el gato. Pero entonces nunca vuela.
Y no hace nada.
No hace nada. Entonces lo que yo digo es que podemos enfrentar la vida sin miedo. No podemos tener miedo de lo que no ha pasado. Miedo a lo que tal vez pueda pasar. ¿Para qué? Si es posible que no pase. Y si pasa, vamos a tener adentro los recursos para enfrentar ese momento. Porque no sabemos cuán fuertes somos hasta que la vida no nos pone a prueba. Y en general, cada vez que nos pone a prueba, descubrimos que somos mucho más fuertes de lo que creíamos y salimos adelante un paso más arriba, más fuerte, más resistente, más generoso, más compasivo, más abierto.
Tus palabras, Isabel, estoy al borde de empezar a llorar. O sea, yo quisiera que todas tuviéramos acceso a tus palabras todo el tiempo. O sea, te vamos a estar llamando por Zoom cada semana. Gracias, Isabel, por esta conversación increíble.
Ha sido muy lindo. Muchas gracias a ti.
Ay, gracias. We have a few questions from our amigas, and I'd love to invite some of them on stage to ask you directly.
Yeah, it has to be quickly because I have a Zoom in 15 minutes.
Sí, claro. So our first question comes from Luisa Salcedo. Luisa, puedes, let's see, your question is in English, so can you please unmute yourself?
Isabel, un placer conocerte. Gracias. Muchísimas gracias. Tus libros literalmente han cambiado mi vida, especialmente tu habilidad de describir la sexualidad. Los encontré en un momento donde yo estaba explorando. Como latinas, la sexualidad no es algo que se celebre o que tengamos la libertad de expresarla. ¿Tú cómo entendiste tu sexualidad y pudiste comunicarla de la forma que lo haces en los libros?
Pésimo. Lo que comunico en los libros, no creas que es experiencia personal, es imaginación e investigación. ¿No? Yo también soy latina y además soy vieja. Entonces, imagínate, nací en el año 42 en el sur del mundo, en una familia conservadora, patriarcal y católica, además. Así que imagínate cómo me criaron. Mira, yo no sabía cómo lo hacían los gays hasta los 30 años, no me lo podía ni siquiera imaginar. Entonces eso te da una idea de la cultura sexual que yo tenía, cero. Pero con el tiempo he tratado de liberarme de todas esas cosas y además de hablar de eso también. El otro día hice un podcast con la fantástica, maravillosa Julia Louis-Dreyfus, la de Seinfeld. Y me preguntó por la sexualidad a los 80 años. Y yo le dije que era mucho mejor con blueberries. Y me dice, ¿blueberries? ¿Cómo con blueberries? Y entonces le digo, bueno, blueberries con marihuana. Entonces, el poder hablar.
Sí, pues tienes que mandar la marca.
Bueno, el poder hablar de las cosas ayuda y el poder comunicar. Si tú eres joven, ustedes están en otra generación, no tienen ninguno de los tabús mentales que tenía yo a tu edad. A mí me ha costado 80 años librarme de ellos.
Gracias por explorar, porque me ha dado mi libertad y me imagino que muchísimas otras. Así que gracias.
Gracias por tu pregunta, Luisa. Isabel, nos vas a tener que mandar la marca de los blueberries, de las famosas blueberries.
Yeah.
Ok, nuestra próxima pregunta viene de Montse Franco.
Hola,
Montse,
¿me escuchan?
¿estás aquí?
Sí, ¿me escuchan?
Sí, te
Sí.
veo, te veo.
Hola, qué honor Isabel, la verdad que mi pregunta salga al aire, un honor, o sea, fan tuya desde la Casa de los Espíritus. Entonces, conecté mucho contigo con la historia que platicabas sobre esa relación que tenías con tu mamá, porque es la misma que yo tengo y más ahora lo escucho que yo estoy en Estados Unidos y ella en México. ¿Cómo podrías platicarnos cómo superaste como esa parte del duelo, no solo con ella, sino pues obviamente con tu hija, cómo superar esa parte y seguir viendo la vida tan maravillosa como tú la ves hoy en día, ¿no?
Mira, en el caso de mi hija, me costó años, te puedes imaginar, o sea, no fue una cosa fácil ni rápida, pero llegó un momento en que yo dije, voy a vivir los años que Paula no va a vivir, y los voy a vivir como los habría vivido ella, con generosidad, con alegría, con compasión, al servicio de otros. Todo lo que ella habría hecho voy a tratar de hacerlo yo, para vivir esos años por ella. Y en el caso de mi madre, que murió de 98, yo la siento conmigo todo el tiempo. Es un ejercicio de memoria y de amor. Mira, estaba anotando en un papel poquito antes de que empezáramos esta entrevista algunos dichos de mi mamá para que no se me olviden. Porque pienso que con el tiempo se me van a olvidar, pero cuando estoy hablando de ella me acuerdo, entonces los tengo que escribir. La siento muy presente todo el tiempo.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias por tu pregunta, gracias por la respuesta, Isabel. Bueno, vamos a terminar nuestra práctica hoy con una pregunta más de Leanis Caldera.
Ok.
Leanis, ¿todavía estás aquí? Let's just give her a second.
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear
Yes.
you, but I can't see you. Oh, yeah, now I can see you. Yeah.
Hi, Isabel. It's so
Hola.
nice to meet you.
You.
My question is, how can one be vulnerable when speaking about certain traumas when you have people belittle your experiences?
Excuse me, I didn't hear you well. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. My question is, how can one, I guess, regain their strength after going through certain traumas when you have people like belittle you? And as a Latina, I guess the topic of mental health and how to break those stereotypes of, I guess, wanting to ask for help and how to regain your strength after being, I guess, put down for your experiences and your traumas in life.
It's very hard and you need help. But I think that you have to get away from those toxic people. That's one thing that I learned late in my life, to say no to toxic people who put you down and who give you suffering.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very hard because they are very close, they are part of your family, but sooner or later you have to let go and just start your own life. And I think that I have tried in my life to let go of grudges. I don't carry any grudge, any feeling of revenge or anger, because the other person doesn't feel it, only you feel it, and it weighs on you, not on anybody else. So why carry it around? So letting go of that requires wisdom. Often you have to mature for that, but also help. So get help. I would recommend absolutely that to get the help, because in therapy I have learned a lot, and it has helped me in moments of great grief and in moments of doubt, especially of doubt, when I don't know who I am or what I want, and I am so tied up by responsibility, by social constrictions, by who I think I am, that I can't get out. And so by learning who I am and what I want and asking myself the question, is this good for me? Is this meaningful to me? And if it isn't, I have to let go. But then you have to let go also with a sense of freedom. Let go with the sense that you left it behind. Really visualize it like a rock that you have been carrying in your belly. And now it's over there. It's no longer yours. It belongs to the world or somebody else. And talk about what you feel. Talk about your pain. Talk about your grief, about your trauma, about the people who put you down. it's fine. And you will find out that half of your friends are in exactly the same situation. Men and women are actually. Women will talk about it, but boys are in the same situation.
Thank you so much.
Open up.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question,
Thank you.
amigas. Yes, thank you. Gracias, Isabel, por compartir tus palabras con nosotras. Estoy tan emocionada que nuestras amigas comiencen a leer tu libro. And thank you, Penguin Random House, for partnering with We All Grow Latina to make this conversation possible. Mil gracias a ustedes, amigas, for sharing space with us tonight. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Isabel, before we wrap it up, I just want to say one more time, thank you for being here with us. It has been such a pleasure. Would you like to share any last words with las amigas antes que se nos acabe el tiempo?
No, just thank everybody for listening to this. Muchas gracias a todas y un gran abrazo colectivo. Y acuérdense, no importa correr riesgo. Life is wonderful with risk. Yeah. Goodbye.
Goodbye. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you'd like to read El Viento Conoce Mi Nombre or the English version, The Wind Knows My Name, in community with us, join the Latinas en Libros book club here in the Amigahood. Ayla will be providing a direct link to the circle in the chat and a link to purchase Isabel's book from the Fabian Flores bookshop. Buenas noches. And again, thank you for sharing space with us tonight.
Thank you.